The email arrived at 6:47 a.m. with no explanation. Just a 50% pay cut delivered through email, exactly 24 hours after I'd closed the largest defense contract in company history. I stared at my laptop screen, coffee growing cold, realizing they thought stealing my $1.5 billion combat drone deal would be easy, but they had no idea what I'd hidden in the fine print of the contract. My name is Marcus Reed, and I'm 35 years old. Until this morning, I was the Senior Director of Defense Contracts at Titan Defense Systems. The email had no subject line, no explanation, just cold corporate language that felt like a slap across the face. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. My salary had been cut in half, effective immediately. 24 hours ago, I was celebrating. The Pentagon had just signed our $1.5 billion combat drone contract, the biggest deal in company history. 8 months of 18-hour days, classified briefings, and technical reviews that made my head spin. I'd flown to 12 different military bases, sat through endless security clearances, and personally redesigned the drone's targeting system when the original specs failed testing. The contract signing happened in a windowless room at the Pentagon. Colonel Patricia Hayes shook my hand and said something I'll never forget. "Marcus, this isn't just about the drones. It's about trust. We're betting our soldiers' lives on your work." I drove home that night thinking about promotions, bonuses, maybe finally buying that house with the big yard. My wife, Sarah, had been patient through all those missed dinners and weekend conference calls. I owed her a real vacation. But this morning, everything felt different. The Titan building looked the same, glass and steel reaching toward the sky. But something was wrong. My key card still worked. My parking spot still had my name on it. But when I reached the executive floor, I found Victoria Sterling standing outside my office. She was young, maybe 22, with perfect blonde hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. I knew her face from company photos. CEO David Sterling's niece, fresh out of business school with an MBA her uncle probably paid for. "Oh, Marcus," she said, holding a measuring tape against my door frame. Perfect timing. I was just checking if my new desk will fit. I stared at her. "Your new desk? Didn't you get the memo? Uncle David assigned me to take over the drone portfolio. He said it was time for fresh leadership." She giggled, actually giggled. "I'm so excited to work with such an important client." That's when I noticed the box on my desk. Not just any box. A cardboard moving box with Marcus's personal items written on the side in Victoria's neat handwriting. She'd already packed my things. My coffee mug, the photo of Sarah, even my stress ball shaped like a fighter jet. The business cards on my desk weren't mine anymore. They read, "Victoria Sterling, Director of Defense Contracts," in shiny gold letters. Act 2. I spent 3 days waiting for someone to explain what was happening. No meetings, no phone calls, no acknowledgement that I'd just delivered the biggest win in company history. Instead, I found myself assigned to special projects, corporate speak for the place where careers go to die. My new workspace wasn't even an office. It was a cubicle squeezed between broken copy machines and boxes of old marketing materials. The nameplate on the gray fabric wall read, "Temporary assignment," in cheap plastic letters. No windows, no privacy, just the constant hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of toner cartridges. That's where I met James Parker. He appeared in my cubicle on Thursday morning, carrying 2 cups of terrible break room coffee and wearing the tired expression of someone who'd seen this movie before. "You're the drone guy," he said, setting 1 cup on my desk. It wasn't a question. James was maybe 55, with gray hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of long nights and broken promises. His clothes were neat, but worn, like someone who still cared about looking professional even when the company had stopped caring about him. "They did the same thing to me 3 years ago," he continued, settling into the plastic chair beside my desk. "Naval defense contract, $800 million. Biggest thing I'd ever worked on." I looked up from the meaningless reports I'd been assigned. What happened? Closed the deal on a Friday, got demoted the following Monday. David Sterling's brother-in-law suddenly became the new director of naval contracts. James laughed, but there was no humor in it. Amazing how talent runs in that family, isn't it? Something cold started growing in my stomach. How many others? 7 that I know of personally. Maybe more. James leaned closer, lowering his voice. The Sterling family has a system. Let the smart people do the hard work, then slide their relatives into position once the deals are signed. Tyler Sterling runs our European division now. Took credit for a missile guidance contract that Rebecca Martinez spent 2 years developing. Mark Sterling handles Asian markets after pushing out Kevin Thompson, who'd built those relationships from scratch. I thought about Victoria's measuring tape, her pre-printed business cards, the way she giggled about fresh leadership. None of this was spontaneous. They planned it all. But here's the thing, James said, standing up and adjusting his tie. You're different from the rest of us. Ow! He smiled for the first time since I'd met him. Because unlike the rest of us, you actually put protection clauses in your contract. Smart lawyers, I'm guessing. I stared at him. Protection clauses? I barely remembered signing my employment agreement 2 years ago, much less what was buried in the legal language. Page 47, James said, walking away. You might want to read the fine print. That afternoon, I started digging through every piece of paperwork I'd ever signed at Titan Defense. I found it at 2 a.m., buried on page 47 of my employment contract like James had said. My kitchen table was covered with legal documents, empty coffee cups, and yellow highlighters as I squinted at the tiny print under my desk lamp. Section 12C, subsection 4. In the event of salary reduction exceeding 25% within 90 days of major contract completion valued above $500 million, employee retains exclusive client relationship management rights for 24 months. My hand started shaking. I'd completely forgotten about this clause. 2 years ago, my lawyer had insisted on adding it after watching another defense contractor get screwed over by his company. I thought it was paranoid at the time, just expensive legal protection I'd never need. Now it looked like the most important sentence I'd ever signed. But the real bombshell came 12 hours later. I was sitting in my cubicle, pretending to work on a pointless market analysis report, when my personal phone buzzed with an encrypted message. Colonel Patricia Hayes, my Pentagon contact. Marcus, urgent matter. Victoria Sterling has been designated as our new primary contact. This creates serious complications. Call me immediately on secure line. I stepped outside into the parking garage, my heart pounding as I dialed the number she'd given me months ago for emergencies only. Colonel Hayes? It's Marcus Reed. Marcus, thank God. We have a problem. Her voice was tense, professional. The Pentagon received official notification that Victoria Sterling is taking over the drone contract management. We ran her background check this morning. I leaned against my car, feeling dizzy. And she doesn't have security clearance. More importantly, she can't get security clearance. Our database shows she worked for Horizon Defense Technologies during her study abroad program in college. I don't understand. What's Horizon Defense? Chinese-owned defense contractor. Anyone with prior employment at foreign defense companies is automatically disqualified from classified projects. It's federal law, no exceptions. Colonel Hayes paused. Marcus, if you're not managing this contract, we can't legally continue with Titan Defense. The drone specifications contain classified targeting algorithms that only cleared personnel can access. My mouth went dry. What does that mean for the contract? It means we start termination procedures tomorrow, unless we get written confirmation that you're still the primary contact. David Sterling has until 5 p.m. today to respond, or we begin shopping this contract to other vendors. I hung up and stood in the concrete garage, watching expensive cars gleam under fluorescent lights. Victoria Sterling, the CEO's golden niece, had just become a liability worth $1.5 billion. And she had no idea. Victoria Sterling was measuring curtains when I walked past my old office an hour later. She'd already moved in completely. Family photos on the desk, a small pink lamp beside her computer, even a mini coffee machine that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She looked up and waved at me through the glass, her smile bright and completely clueless. I kept walking to the elevator, my phone buzzing with increasingly frantic messages. David Sterling had called 3 times, his voicemails growing more desperate with each one. The first was casual. Marcus, need to chat about some Pentagon paperwork. The second was worried. Marcus, this is urgent. Please call back immediately. The third was barely controlled panic. Marcus, we need to meet right now. There's been a misunderstanding. I didn't call back. Instead, I forwarded Colonel Hayes' message to my personal email and deleted it from the company server. Then I sat in my cubicle, watching the chaos unfold through the glass walls of the executive floor. By noon, the hallways were buzzing with lawyers in expensive suits carrying thick folders. David Sterling's assistant looked like she was about to cry, fielding phone calls and running between conference rooms. Through the glass, I could see David himself pacing behind his desk, his usually perfect silver hair disheveled, his tie loosened. Victoria had stopped measuring curtains. That's when James Parker appeared in my cubicle again, this time carrying a bag of vending machine chips and wearing the biggest smile I'd seen from him yet. "Enjoying the show?" he asked, settling into the plastic chair. "I don't know what you mean. Marcus, the entire executive floor is having a meltdown. Lawyers everywhere, phones ringing off the hook, and David Sterling looks like he's about to have a heart attack." James opened his chips. "Word is spreading that there's some kind of problem with the Pentagon contract." I shrugged, pretending to focus on my computer screen. "Problems happen. You know what's funny?" James continued. "I heard through the grapevine that Victoria Sterling might have some kind of security issue. Something about foreign contractors and background checks." Before I could respond, my phone rang. David Sterling himself. "Marcus, we need to talk. Now." His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the desperation underneath. "I'm in the middle of a project, David. Can it wait?" "No, it cannot wait. Conference room B, 5 minutes." I hung up and looked at James, who was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "You planned this," he said. "It wasn't a question. I didn't plan anything. I just read my contract. And now they're about to find out what happens when you steal from someone who actually knows how to play the game." I stood up, straightening my tie. "James, can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "When they pushed you out 3 years ago, did you ever think about fighting back?" His smile faded. "Every day. But I didn't have what you have." "What do I have?" "Leverage. And more importantly, you have something they never counted on." James stood up too, brushing chip crumbs off his pants. "You have principles. They've been playing dirty for so long, they forgot that some people actually follow the rules." I walked toward the elevator, my heart steady for the first time in days. David Sterling was waiting in conference room B with Victoria, 2 lawyers I didn't recognize, and the head of legal, Sandra Morrison. Victoria's perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her hands were folded on the table like a schoolgirl in trouble. "Marcus, thank you for coming," David began, his voice carefully controlled. "There seems to be some confusion with our Pentagon contacts." I sat down across from them, saying nothing. "Apparently," Sandra Morrison jumped in, "there are some technical requirements that need clarification. Something about security clearances and personnel oversight." Victoria spoke for the first time, her voice smaller than usual. "I've reviewed all the contract materials, Marcus. I understand the technical specifications perfectly." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. "Would you like me to call Colonel Hayes? She can explain the requirements directly." The room went silent. David Sterling's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscles in his neck. "That won't be necessary," he said slowly. "I'm sure we can resolve this internally." "Resolve what exactly?" David's facade finally cracked. "Marcus, let's cut the bullshit. The Pentagon is threatening to terminate our contract unless you personally remain as the primary contact. They're saying Victoria can't get security clearance because of some job she had in college." Victoria's face went pale. "I told you that internship wasn't important." "You told me it was a study abroad program," David snapped. "You didn't mention it was with a Chinese defense contractor." The room erupted into arguments, but I just sat there, watching them tear each other apart, knowing I held all the cards. At exactly 4:45 p.m., I walked into David Sterling's corner office, carrying a single manila folder and wearing the calmest expression I could manage. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk, sleeves rolled up, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past 6 hours. Victoria slouched in a leather chair beside him, her perfect makeup smudged for what looked like recent tears. 15 minutes, Marcus," David said without looking up from his phone. "The Pentagon wants an answer by 5 p.m., or they start the contract termination process." I sat down and placed my folder on his desk. I know. Good. Then let's make this simple. David finally met my eyes, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. Full salary restoration, effective immediately. 20% bonus for the inconvenience. We'll call it an administrative error and move forward. Victoria shifted in her chair. Uncle David, I can handle this contract. I've been studying the technical specifications all week. Studying them doesn't give you security clearance, Victoria, I said quietly. And it doesn't erase your employment history. David slammed his hand on the desk. This is ridiculous. She worked for Horizon for 3 months during college. It was an internship, not a career. I opened my folder and pulled out a printed email. This is from Colonel Hayes, received 2 hours ago. Horizon Defense Technologies is classified as a foreign adversary contractor by the Department of Defense. Any prior employment, including internships, results in permanent disqualification from classified projects. The color drained from David's face as he read the email. Victoria grabbed it from his hands, her eyes scanning the text frantically. This is insane, she whispered. I filed coffee and answered phones. I never saw classified information. The law doesn't care what you did there, I explained. It only cares that you were there. David stood up and walked to his window, staring out at the parking lot below. What do you want, Marcus? I want my job back. My real job, not some made-up position to save face. Fine. You're reinstated as senior director, full salary, full benefits. I shook my head. That's not enough. Victoria looked up sharply. What do you mean, not enough? I pulled out a second document from my folder, a job offer letter with the Prometheus Defense logo at the top. While you were panicking today, I was taking phone calls. Prometheus offered me executive vice president of defense contracts. Double my original salary, equity package, and full authority over their new robotics division. David spun around. You can't be serious. They also offered to hire James Parker as senior analyst, Rebecca Martinez as European operations director, and Kevin Thompson as head of Asian markets. I stood up slowly. Funny thing about screwing over talented people. They remember and they talk to each other. The silence in the room was deafening. Victoria's hands were shaking as she stared at the Prometheus letterhead. Marcus, let's be reasonable here, David said, his voice taking on a pleading tone I'd never heard before. You built your career at Titan. This is your home. My home was the office you gave to your unqualified niece. I picked up my folder. My home was the respect I earned through 15 years of hard work. You took that away for family politics. We can fix this, Victoria said desperately. I'll step aside. You can have the office back. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. She was young, thrown into a situation way over her head, used by her uncle as a pawn in his family business games. Victoria, this isn't about you, I said gently. This is about a system that rewards connections over competence. You never had a fair chance to succeed because you were set up to fail from the beginning. David's face hardened. So what's your price? Name it. My price is watching you explain to the board why you just lost the biggest contract in company history. I walked toward the door. My price is knowing that 7 talented people who got screwed over by your family are about to get the careers they deserve. The Pentagon deadline is in 10 minutes, David called after me. I paused at the door. I know. I'm calling Colonel Hayes at exactly 5 p.m. to inform her that Marcus Reed is no longer available through Titan Defense Systems. You're destroying this company, Victoria said, tears starting to flow again. I turned back one last time. No, Victoria, I'm not destroying anything. I'm just refusing to keep building something that was designed to tear people down. 6 months later, I stood in the executive conference room on the top floor of Prometheus Defense, looking out at the Washington skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The morning briefing had just ended, and the table was scattered with contracts worth more than I'd ever imagined possible. The $2.8 billion robotics deal with the Air Force was signed and active. 3 international partnerships were in final negotiations. And the team I'd built was everything I dreamed of during those dark days in my cubicle at Titan. James Parker knocked on the open door, carrying his usual terrible coffee, but wearing a smile that had become permanent over the past few months. Got a minute, boss? I laughed. James still called me boss, even though his official title was Senior Strategic Analyst, a position that came with a corner office and a salary that finally matched his decades of experience. What's on your mind? Rebecca just closed the German contract. $68 million for advanced targeting systems. He sat down in one of the leather chairs that surrounded the conference table. Kevin's meeting with the Japanese delegation went better than expected, too. They want to triple their initial order. I nodded, but I could tell there was something else on his mind. There's news about Titan, he said carefully. I've been expecting this conversation. For months, I'd avoided reading industry publications or checking news about my former company. But rumors had a way of reaching you anyway. David Sterling? I asked. Gone. Board forced him out 3 weeks ago. Stock price dropped 40% after they lost the Pentagon contract, and when word got out about their talent management practices, other clients started asking questions. James paused. Victoria's gone too. Turns out nepotism doesn't look great to investors. I felt a strange mix of emotions, satisfaction, yes, but also something that might have been sadness. Not for David, who'd made his choices, but for all the talented people who'd lost their jobs when Titan started bleeding contracts. How many layoffs? I asked. 200 so far, including some good people who had nothing to do with the Sterling family mess. That hit harder than I'd expected. James, start putting together a list of anyone from Titan who might be a good fit here. Quality people who got caught in the crossfire. Already on it, he said, pulling out his phone. I've got 17 names so far. Engineers, project managers, even some of the support staff who really knew their stuff. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I glanced at it and felt my stomach drop. Marcus, this is Victoria Sterling. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to apologize. You were right about everything. I was in way over my head, and I let my uncle use me to hurt people who didn't deserve it. I'm working at a small consulting firm now, starting from the bottom, actually learning the business instead of having it handed to me. I just wanted you to know that watching you stand up for what was right taught me something important about integrity. I'm sorry for my part in what happened to you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then showed it to James. Huh, he said after reading it. That's not what I expected. Me either. You going to respond? I thought about it. Victoria had been wrong, but she'd also been young and manipulated by someone she trusted. Everyone deserved a chance to grow from their mistakes. I typed back. Victoria, thank you for reaching out. It takes courage to admit when we're wrong. I hope your new position gives you the chance to build something meaningful. Good luck. Colonel Hayes appeared in the doorway, wearing her dress uniform and carrying a folder marked with official Pentagon seals. Marcus, sorry to interrupt. We just received approval for Phase 2 of the robotics program. Congressional Budget Committee signed off this morning. James whistled low. How much? $4.2 billion over 3 years, she said, setting the folder on the table. Largest defense technology contract in the past decade. I looked around the room, at James, who'd finally found a company that valued his experience, at the contracts that represented not just money but innovation that could save lives, at the view of a city where decisions got made that affected the entire world. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about proving that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it costs you everything, creates something bigger than any of us could build alone.